Welcome to the podcast of Terrace Consulting.
So welcome to another episode of the podcast, episode 68 already. And the first one, we're going to have someone related with health and safety. So I've touched base with many different departments and profiles, but never anyone related to that topic, which I think is very, very interesting, very important. And I haven't touched it yet. So great to have here Paul Moxness, which is managing partner, of NorthPoint International and co-founder of the Always Care consulting company, is connecting from Canada. Paul, how are you?
I'm good, Pablo, and thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure. So,
thank you. Thanks for giving me some of your time to talk about your experience with. It's basically a lifetime with Radisson. I'd like you to go through it, and we'll go through your career, some tips, some insights from the industry of your sector, health and safety, and especially security, and also some tips for young people, which usually is a sequence that I follow with all the guests of the podcast. So first things first, I'd like you to know, well, why you chose that path in your career and how it went from the beginning until now, running a couple of consulting companies.
Yeah, and like you said, I had a lifetime at Radisson. I think when I left the company, I had more years of seniority than the average age of the employees in the company. But so I was kind of the dinosaur. But it was all down to a lot of coincidences and luck and just things that happened. I like to say that I had a 4-decade gap year. And on my 4-decade gap year, I had a 30-year career in a company that didn't want to hire me. And the backstory is that I grew up here where I live now in Canada. And when I was finished high school in 1978, I went to spend a year in Europe. And it just took me 4 decades to get back. And along the way, I ended up starting out as a hotel security guard in what was then the SAS Scandinavia Hotel, now Radisson Blu, in Oslo, Norway. And I had dropped out of a master's program in psychology at university, and I just wanted to work in travel. Nobody would really hire me. And even the hotel, the security manager that interviewed me, he said I was too old and too educated. And when I started to defend myself, and because I really needed a job, he said, you have way too many opinions. But in the end, there was only 2 applicants for the job. The other person withdrew his application, so they were kind of stuck with me. And so I took the hint and stayed with the company for my whole career. And it was basically a combination of luck that I got that job to begin with. I didn't really choose hotels. I wanted to work in travel, but because I couldn't get a job, I chose that hotel because it was owned by an airline. And I thought, hey, security guard in a hotel, how hard can that be? You got the foot in the door at the airline, and then I could apply for jobs internally. But once I got into the hotel, I think probably by the end of the first weekend I worked, I just felt really at home there. And from then on, it was basically just following Richard Branson's guidance. If somebody gives you a good opportunity and you're not sure if you can do it, just say yes and then figure it out. And that's pretty much what I did from 1987 to when I left in 2018.
Which is a long span of time. Anyone who helped you there? Any mentor, someone who helped you develop maybe throughout your career?
Yeah, I was really lucky when I started out, and we were owned by Radisson, not by Radisson, but by Scandinavian Airlines. Janne Carlson was the legendary leader of SAS at the time, and they had just been chosen, I think, the world's best airline or something like that. And they were really cutting edge of what airlines were doing at the time. And then shortly after I started, Kurt Ritter became the CEO of the hotel division there. And he was, also with the company for years and years and years. I think he left in 2013, 14, somewhere around there. And so having the opportunity to work so closely with such legendary leaders was great. And then on the outside, back in the day, the International Hotel and Restaurant Association was a real voice of the industry. And their CEO, David McMillan, who I still keep in touch with today, was a great mentor, and he taught me a lot about the power of partnerships. And then, you know, I was also really lucky. I had a long career with the company, but I also had two guys that were part of my department almost from day one, Kjell Arvidsson and Gert Koermans. Gert is still with Radisson. Kjell was there before I got there. And so we followed each other, and having people like them that I knew and I trusted, and you know, I knew that they would challenge me if there was anything. We knew each other inside and out, and it was just really helpful to have such a close-knit group around me the whole time. And then out in our hotels, I learned so much from because the hotels are where the rubber hits the road, right? And so I learned so much from people that went through the real hardships, you know, tsunamis, invasions, pandemics, terrorist attacks, and just seeing how people responded to that taught me so much about strength and resilience. So yeah, there's been a lot of mentors, way too many to mention. And like even today, I love connecting with the new people that are coming into hospitality with new ideas. And you know, if there's one thing that we need more of right now, it's innovation. And some of the ideas that people are coming up with now, it's great. Had a meeting yesterday with a kid who had some really interesting ideas about what the future of hotels and offices and things will be. And I just try to soak up as much knowledge and input from as many people as I can.
Brilliant. Keep innovating and keep yourself up to date in that sense. Currently now, I mean, you left Radisson and you are heading to companies, as I was saying, managing partner of NorthPoint International and co-founder of the Always Care Consulting. So what does it mean? What is your daily life as? Yeah, so
NorthPoint International is a hospitality security support company. We launched just before the pandemic, so great timing there. But it started. Three of us were global chief security officers from big hotel groups. So Mark Sana was with Hyatt. David Langhorne was with Intercontinental, and I was with Radisson. And we all left our companies in 2018 within 2-3 months of each other. And so about a year and a half later, we banded together and said, you know, we're getting old, but we're not that old. We can still contribute. We can still do something. And so we've banded together with an expert in cyber threat and crime and another expert in business resiliency and franchise support. So what we do now is try to help hotel companies and especially smaller ones that don't have the internal resources. We say we provide affordable access to expertise. And what we're seeing most recently now is that companies are discovering, as they look to emerge from the pandemic and the hardship there, is that their programs, their manuals, their support functions don't really match what they have in their company anymore. You know, people have been laid off, there's been changes, reorganizations. So we're trying to help companies adapt to become more resilient and sustainable. And we also do some support work for the UN and the OSCE on some global initiatives that they have. Then my other role is with the Always Care Consulting Company, and that was founded by my wife and I when I left Radisson. And last year, when we couldn't travel, we started looking at all the pictures from our past trips from, you know, many years of traveling around the world. And what struck us was that it wasn't so much the Michelin-starred restaurants or the first-class champagne when you get bumped up to business class on international flights or anything like that. It was the experiences and interactions that we'd had with people that we met in hotels and restaurants or wherever we were on our travels. And we started to think about how the pandemic is speeding up the digitalization of the industry, and that's something that's actually long overdue. You know, we're slow adapters of technology in hospitality, but what we noticed was that a lot of the touch points, what Jana Carlson used to call the moments of truth, the interactions between people, staff and guests, are becoming fewer. And what we feel is that, and looking at our own experiences and what really stuck out in our minds, what we really remember, what brings us back to places isn't the technology, it's the interaction with the people. And because these interactions are becoming fewer or shorter, we feel that they might become even more defining for the overall guest experience. So we ended up writing a book called Spin the Bottle Service, Hospitality in the Age of AI. And it will come out in June. And hopefully that'll be just in time for a real rebound in the travel industry, many places around the world.
Hopefully, yeah, that's good timing in that sense. And very good point in the sense of there is more and more technology which should be used in a positive way to not to stop the interaction, the human interaction, as you are saying. Yeah, you're completely right. The experience is the most important. And if we focus too much on the automation, then we might be missing behind the real face-to-face experience, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think, you know, for me, technology in hospitality, we should focus on making things simpler, smoother, more sustainable, you know, helping to make our companies more resilient. But we should be careful about thinking that they can replace all the people doing all the things. And I think sometimes we lose track of that. You know, let's make a room service robot. Well, really? Let's make a booking system that is simpler, faster, better before we start trying to replace real people where the connectivity is between the guest and the property, right? So I think if we focus more on how technology can support us rather than replace people, I think we would be in a much better state.
I agree with you 100%. So big change then in your case from all these years in Radisson to setting up your consulting company. Well, what is what you enjoy the most now? You were talking about providing affordable expertise to independent companies. So is that the highlight, or what is your?
Yeah, and I mean, you know, I used to always say I was 24/7 on call from the day cell phones or mobile phones became, you know, something that we all had. And even though I never minded always having my phone with me, always having it on, and it's a bit of an adrenaline thing, right? It drives you. You're over 1,000 hotels around the world had my phone number, and when things really went sideways, my phone rang, right? And so that was great. But what I noticed was that when I left, and I mean, even before this call, I switched my phone off, right? I never switched my phone off before. So it's that freedom there is I've really noticed it, that I didn't feel like I was stressed out before, but now I feel the freedom to be more creative, more proactive, maybe more outspoken. And I think especially writing has always been like my not so secret passion but I could only really explore it maybe once a year around my annual New Year's letter to friends and family around the world. Whereas now, you know, I wrote a book that doesn't have anything to do with safety and security, really. It's just a hospitality book. Yeah, so it's just given me the opportunity to explore something like that. And also I have time now to participate in you know, online groups, mentorships. I take part in a twice monthly so-called huddle that's organized by this CSO, Center for Leadership and Development at ACES International, and having time to really go out and, you know, listen to people, to share ideas and thoughts with people rather than just play corporate catch-up all day has been tough. And then, of course, with the NorthPoint, you know, we're building it from the ground up. We're getting really great response from some of our clients that they feel like this is something that what we're doing for them is something that they just don't have time or resources to do for themselves. And we can provide that support in a way that, you know, it costs way less than hiring a full-time person for them. So it's kind of a win-win.
Mm-hmm. Great. The creativity side now. I have to touch, we cannot avoid talking about the pandemic, which has hit our industry very, very hard. What's your opinion on how things will evolve from now?
Well, I think, you know, there's a lot of pent-up demand. I think when the vaccination rollout gets further down the road and we can see that, you know, the numbers are curtailed and we're allowed to open up things a bit more, I think there will be a big rebound. I mean, you can see the videos from spring break in Florida last week, right? So probably not the best timing yet, but I think it's just kind of an indicator of how much people miss traveling, how much they want to travel. And I think it will come back really quickly, but I think the long-term, more sustainable, recognizable travel patterns might be a little bit further down the way before we see that kind of business come back. So I think there'll be like a quick bounce and then there'll be a little bit of a struggle. And there's also been huge cost associated with it, which at some point is going to have to be paid back. So I think we'll have to be concerned about austerity measures and other measures that could be put in place that will have the unintended, but perhaps will also curb travel and hospitality demand a little bit, at least in the short to medium term. So it's a little bit back and forth in my mind. It's like, how optimistic am I? And I'm a little bit afraid, and I think we've already seen a few signs of it, that there will be spikes in crimes and other issues that we've maybe not thought so much about during the pandemic. But I think that we'll see that the gaps between where companies have protection in place and maybe have removed some of that protection for cost saving reasons, I think that could come back to bite some people once travel picks up again. We'll see the gaps between what we had before and what we thought we had, and then the new threat, or not the new threats, but the return of threats that have been maybe on the back burner. We'll realize that, oops, we've dropped our guard a bit on those. So that's some of those things will come back as well. So I think we're in still for, even though we get a hold of the pandemic and we can start to open up our societies a little bit more again, I think we're still in for a little bit of a bumpy ride for a while yet.
Mm-hmm. Okay, some time to go back to normality, whatever that means. One point I want to touch with you, it's about the hospitality being sort of famous for not investing much on talent and training development. So you've had a long experience in the industry. What is your view on that? Yeah,
and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why we're going to discover all these gaps. I think we're kind of, it's so easy to think, oh, if I just had this or if I just had that, all my problems would go away. So we think we can buy something and everything will become better. But at the same time, we don't take time and we don't use resources to actually train people, which are probably the most important resource that most companies have, is the knowledge and the capabilities, the flexibilities that people actually offer. And, you know, when I started out way back when, the induction program at the hotel, I think it was a whole week long before you were actually really thrust into the workplace. today in many places that, there's hardly any formal induction training. And even in the brand service training at Radisson, when I started, it was several days long. The general manager certification program we developed was a week long. And then, over time, those things we figure out that, we don't need to do that much training. So let's make it a 3-day course or a 2-day course, or let's just put it online and people can read it for themselves. And I think that really impacts us negatively in ways that we don't think. I think it's destroyed a lot of the personal connection guests feel with hotels, is that people, they're not trained enough to know their business, to know their property, to know their jobs well enough to really make guests feel comfortable and to know that they're in the hands of true experts. We have really well educated people, but not really well trained people. And there's a little difference between those two things.
Good point, to make a difference in there. Mm-hmm. So one point was invested in training and development. The other one is investing in technology, which again, hotels tend not to be early adopters when it comes to technology. How's your experience been on that?
Yeah, exactly. We're not early adopters. I mean, you can still go to hotels today and have to pay for internet. I mean, really? For me, it's just crazy. And I remember Mr. Ritter, I think it was back in the 90s that he decided all of our hotels would have free internet access. And at the time, everybody, it was a huge revenue source for us. And especially in emerging market countries, you could pay, almost as much as your hotel room just for internet access. And overnight, he said, nope, it's going to be free because this is going to be the most important thing for guests in our hotels. It'll take over from TVs and things like that. And that's true. And it's a huge disappointment to me every time I come into a hotel, and you either have to pay for internet, or they force you to join their loyalty program so they can spam you the rest of your life. And if you do that, they'll give you free internet. I think it's crazy. I think we should focus way more on investing in technology that makes the processes as simple and smooth as possible, and less focusing on technology as a revenue stream in and of itself. So I think if we use technology the right way to attract people and guests, to make them feel comfortable and safe, and ensure that the operation of our properties is really easy and smooth, then we'll be able to see big benefits. And we'll also have we'll be also able to use the people to focus on taking care of the guests that come in.
Mm-hmm. True. I agree. Also agree on that point. Safety and security, I don't think it's a department that is really looked after. So I have the impression that GMs or owners invest the minimum required just to comply with the regulations. So what would be your arguments to drive a GM or an owner to invest properly in safety or security?
Well, I think one of the things that happens is that they invest way too much money for something that doesn't really give them what they need. And they're driven by fear, or they're driven by vendors that prey on their fear and say, if you don't buy this, then all these bad things are going to happen to you. And so they don't really know where to start. I mean, if you look at hotel schools around the world, I don't think any of them really have any in-depth study of or subjects on safety and security. And so if you become a general manager, you're not educated for the responsibility that you actually get legally when you sign the contract, right? Because as the legal operator, you're responsible for the safe operation of your property. And I think that's a nagging fear that a lot of GMs have. And many can, succumb to vendors that come in and say, hey, buy my stuff and, we'll put 3,000 cameras in your lobby and you'll be good. And it's basically a waste of money. So one of the things that we do that I'd say is that you need to ask yourselves, what are you going to invest in and why are you going to invest? And at NorthPoint, the way we talk about it is we say that our focus is on intelligence-led, threat-based programs. So it's not about fear, it's about threat. And it's about knowing what's coming and what ways you can mitigate the risks that are coming, so that you have something that gives you what you need, but maybe even gives you more than what you need. I think a lot of people don't understand that there are secondary, if you do safety and security properly, there are secondary benefits that often go unexploited. And I'm thinking about if you do it properly and you can use it to enhance your other offerings, and you can also use it, the way we see things today is, companies, they vet hotels before they sign contracts. So in many ways, it's not the salesperson that should be selling to the procurement person, but it's the security person at the hotel company that should be selling to the security person at the potential client company. Because once those two get their connection together, you can see that hotels can secure contracts much easier to sustain contracts. So looking at the added benefits of safety and security instead of the simple cost of how much do I need to buy and what do I need to buy and blah, blah, blah. It's for me, it's still an unexploited resource that many hotels overlook.
Okay, well noted. I want to ask you a couple of questions about for a younger generation. So one will be the first one. What will you tell, what kind of advice would you give someone to entice them to go into the hospitality industry?
I would say, if you feel the slightest inclination that it might be something for you, just do it. It might not have the best hours or the best pay. I mean, hotels operate 24/7, so you're going to be working nights and weekends and holidays and things like that. But for me, I didn't know that I wanted to work in hotels. I just kind of stumbled in the door. And even when I went for my first interview, I'd never been in a 5-star hotel before. And when I got to the hotel for the interview, I couldn't even go in the main entrance. I didn't feel worthy of going into a 5-star hotel. I didn't come from that kind of background. Luckily, that hotel had a shopping arcade on the side, so I went in there and managed to drag myself up to the lobby and say that I was there for the interview. But my number one thing is if you feel like you want to work in hospitality or travel or hotels or whatever, do it, try it out. You can learn so many lessons about life, about yourself, that you just can't find anywhere else. It's a crossroads of the world. You see, I studied psychology for 6 years at university, but I learned way, way more working in hotels than I did going to university for all those years. And there are so many things you can learn. When I started out as a security guard, my boss said, you're security, so you will only be called when something bad has happened. And so all your interaction with guests will be negative. And, if I just looked at myself as being a security guard, that probably would have been true, but I never felt like that. I felt like I was a hotel employee. And I think that's another thing, that if you're going into any job, but especially in hospitality, you need to know, the more you can learn about the whole business you're in, how the company operates, what everybody does, what all the things are there. Number one, it becomes way more interesting. Number two, you learn way more about how you fit as a cog in that bigger wheel of that keeps a 500-room hotel ticking over 24 hours a day. And it's all about people. It's just a fascinating industry. So, sounds like you, I'd say, you know, get on the train. It's a really fun ride.
Great. Very positive advice. Now, second question for the young ones. What about the ones who might already be studying or starting their career are now concerned because of the current scenario? So, I mean, you've lived through a lot. So what will be the advice for you, those ones who might be a bit pessimistic now?
Yeah, and I can understand that pessimism because it's really tough times. And, you know, a lot of people have probably already been laid off, might not know if, when, or where they might have a chance to get rehired. But, you know, I think long-term, travel and hospitality will come back. It's just so important for our world. It's so important for every society around the world. There is a hospitality need. And so, you know, hang in there, it will come back. And, you know, I've seen enough and been around long enough that, you know, we've had hotels in war zones where the hotel was kind of the only normalcy these people had in their lives. And when they left to go home after work, they were walking out into a world of extreme uncertainty. But, you know, that's what hotels do, is that we take care of people. So when these people came to work, they were some of the best employees the company had because they focused 110% on doing their jobs as good as they could, because that was their connection to normal. And, you know, you might be working through now and think, oh, it's boring, oh, it's hard, oh, it's tough. But, you know, now is your chance to prove how good you are, how strong you are. And just, if you diligently do your job and focus a lot on that, it helps distract from a lot of the fear that we see in the media and online today. So my advice at the end of the day right now for anybody in hospitality is, you know, hang in there and try to use this time now to become as good as you can at what you do. And even if you hardly have any guests, now is your chance to, you know, when we had SARS in 2002, I guess, in China, the GM phoned me, and before SARS, they had about 300 rooms occupied per day. And within a couple of days after China or Beijing was put on the don't go there list by the WHO, they were down to 8 or 9 rooms occupied per day. And I had daily phone calls with him just to kind of keep his motivation up. And I said to him, I said, you know, if you ever thought about when you get old and are thinking about retiring and maybe want to open your own little bed and breakfast where you can personally take care of every guest, now's your chance to see if that's for you, because now you can get to know every single person that walks in your door personally. And you know, really show them and really showcase why they can trust you to take care of them. So that's kind of an opportunity that we have right now when hotels are running really low occupancies and it's a struggle. And finally, you know, here in British Columbia where I live, we have a public health officer who's done a really good job of communicating, you know, what the rules are and what the situation is and how we're going to manage through this. And she regularly reminds us, she uses a sentence, she says, you know, remember the situation we're in, it's not easy, but it's not forever, it's just for now. And so we know, and especially now when we have vaccines coming, you know, we can really see that the light at the end of the tunnel isn't a train coming towards us. It is real light. There is going to be real reopening at some point in the not too distant future. So yeah, final advice is just kind of hang in there.
Okay, very good advice also for a young one there. It's not forever, it's just for now. Good. Last one, I want to ask you, I don't know if you have any cause, any that you support, an NGO, any charity that you work with. You want to share it now?
Yeah, so, you know, you asked me earlier about, you know, what my daily life's like now and what the change is from my corporate life and things. And another thing that I've become involved in since I think last September is something on LinkedIn called the Kindness Games. And it was two security professionals, really good guys, but they'd never met in person, but they were connecting online. They were talking back and forth and what the global situation was like. And one of them said, you know, what the world really needs now is more kindness, right? The world needs a daily dose of kindness. And so they challenged each other to do a 30 post challenge on LinkedIn and put something out that said, you know, gave a shout out to somebody that motivated them, that helped them, that had inspired them in their careers or their personal lives. And so then they started, and they called it the kindness game. It was, I guess, kind of a sideways reference to the Hunger Games. And they challenged each other to do this every day for 30 days. And then they started reaching out to other people. They reached out to me, and I didn't know either of these two people before either, but they'd heard of me. So they reached out and said, hey, you know, we're starting this. Do you want to be part of it? So I joined and did my 30 posts. I'm into kindness games overtime now. So it's a really fun way, and it's really started to take on a life of its own. Over 20 people now have completed that challenge. So what the only little thing that bothers me there is that it doesn't surprise me that it was started by security people, but I can't really figure out why more hospitality people haven't jumped in, because kindness is something that we do as part of our daily jobs with hospitality, right? So I would love to see some hospitality people jump in and join the kindness games. It's as easy as just creating a post, give a shout out to someone that helped you or supported you, either, you know, in your work life or your daily private life or wherever. Throw it up on LinkedIn and use the hashtag the kindness games. And we're hopeful that it will turn into a really good movement that spreads a little bit of positivity in a world, especially today, with so much uncertainty and fear bombarding us every day due to the pandemic and a lot of other things that are going on.
True. So hashtag the kindness games. Okay. Thanks very much. I was taking some notes on the beginning. So you're talking about keeping yourself innovative or being involved with innovation, which is very important through the career. You talk about the moments of truth from Ritter, the interaction with guests and how important they are to keep the experiences alive, that the technology should support us and not replace us, linking it back to the human touch. Another great sentence you mentioned, we have an industry with highly educated people, but not well trained, focusing on the importance on training. Title of your book coming up soon, Spin the Bottle Service, Hospitality in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, AI. And this last one, hashtag the kindness games. That's the notes I was taking. So Paul, thank you very much for your time, all the insights, all the info you've shared.
Well, thank you, Pablo. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. I've seen a good few of your podcasts, and it's an honor to be included among some of the people that you've had on before.
My pleasure. Thanks again, and keep in touch, okay? Cheers.
Thank you, Pablo. Bye-bye.
That was all for now. Hope you found it useful. Remember that you have more information on our website, www.torresconsulting.co.uk, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and Twitter. Stay well. Goodbye for now.